Gamers, welcome back. We're inching closer to Crota's end day 1 for Destiny 2, and there's been a bunch of discussion in the community about what weapons and loadouts to bring for day 1. Some people think optimizing peak damage for every loadout is the way to go. Others think that it shouldn't be that complicated and not to overthink things. And today I'm going to put my 2 cents in and also tell you guys my thoughts and what I would recommend in general for the public to bring it to day 1. As for what side I'm on, I lean more on the side of not overcomplicating your loadouts and thinking everything must be peak numbers and trying to do 54 hot swaps per damage phase. Day 1 raids come down to common sense, communication, and some proper build crafting. Worrying about squeezing out the world's best damage shouldn't be a priority. Your goal is to beat the raid day 1, not to increase your chances of making mistakes and wiping. Now, obviously, optimizing your damage applies to some degree, of course, and teams that actively race for worlds first will worry about that, but for the general masses, with the amount of people that attempt these day 1s, I believe kissing is the key. Yeah, you heard that right. I didn't stutter. Keep it simple, stupid. With that being said, let's go over my personal recommendations for what weapons you should consider bringing in for day 1, and we'll mention some classes afterwards. To start off, we're going to go slot by slot and legendary then exotic, just to keep things simplified. Also, it's worth noting that because I mention a weapon here, it doesn't mean you must bring it into the raid. We only have so many slots for each weapon type, and at the end of the day, it'll come down to how many slots you have, which of these weapons you have, and what you're comfortable with. So, here we go. First up, the kinetic slot primaries. Kicking it off with All Reliable, we have Fatebringer. Hand Cannon's got a nice buff this season, and Fatebringer has always been at the top of the food chain when it comes to using base primaries. There's going to be tons of Thrall in the raid anyway, and Firefly could come in nicely for that add density section. You got Rufus's Fury as well, and any auto rifle with adaptive munitions as an option. Rufus's can be crafted with target lock, which could be very nice, especially with barrier champions running around. Likewise with any auto rifle that has adaptive munitions, making it much easier for you to pierce barrier shields and elemental shields, not matching that weapon type. And remember, Bungie did say, specifically, there will be more shielded enemies in this raid. For exotics in this slot, let's start off with Osteo Shriga. It's a great exotic, has multiple functions, and has a very high ease of use rate with you barely having to even aim. Then we've got Outbreak Perfected and Touch of Malice. Both of these serve as somewhat the same function. If you're running out of ammo and you need DOT or boss damage, it's a good swap choice. Lastly, I'll mention Witchender has a decent choice as well, as it's a good barrier option with unlimited ammo, but I wouldn't say it's a must-have for this raid particularly. For kinetic slot energy weapons, we've got Heritage for up-close damage with a slug, Riptide for built-in capability to deal with barriers and unstops, Witherhoard for its usual DOT shenanigans, Conditional Finality as a good source of both damage and control as it can freeze and ignite enemies, which means unstops too, Agriceptor for incredible crowd control for something like the Abyss, Arbalist for its usual Arbalist things with everything involving shields, and finally Izanagi's Burden for the huge burst damage potential. Moving on to the energy slot, let's start with primaries again. Both Icarus SMG and Callus Minitool are extremely valuable, as they provide great ad control with things like Volt Shot and Incandescent, but also help deal with the potential increase in Arc and Solar Shields. Tyranny of Heaven and Arsenic Bite also fall in the same boat here, as they are good at clearing single targets and breaking shields, but also additionally can be used to break barrier champion shields, although I wouldn't say that's the best choice for barriers personally. Then we've got Nation of Beast and Zuli's Bane here in the same vein as Fatebringer, good hand cannons that can also roll Volt Shot and Incandescent or even Firefly, respectively. To top off primaries in this slot, in exotic form, I like to give a shout out to both Risk Runner and Trinity Ghoul. Both can be monsters for clearing waves of enemies, and Risk Runner in particular also benefits from arc-based damage against you, something that the Hive do a lot. As for the non-primary energy weapons in this slot, let's start with one of the new seasonal weapons, Eremite. A great fusion introduced in this season with Season of the Witch that can be crafted very easily if you're keeping up with the seasonal content. It can get Envious Assassin as well as Reservoir Burst or Controlled Burst. Additionally, if you don't have that and you don't have the time to go craft it out, Loaded Question is a good replacement too, which can roll the exact same perks if you got it last season. Next are Waveframe Grenade Launchers. Let's just get it out of the way now. If you aren't bringing in a Forbearance, you're just doing yourself a disservice. Now, if you don't happen to own a Forbearance, there are some lesser replacements for it. Harsh Language is a world drop, Explosive Personality is craftable if you've gotten it before, and as of this season, Dead Messenger is also craftable as a great Waveframe option, although you'd be giving up your exotic slot for this one as opposed to the other ones. Finally, we arrive at the heavy slot. First up are, of course, rocket launchers. They've been in the meta scene for quite some time, and even with the recent news of Pack Hunter, I think rockets are still a strong contender to bring. Now, this is especially so if Crota becomes properly damageable and not just through sword damage. You've got your Apex Predators and your Cold Comforts, and of course, recently buffed bipod rockets. That could be a decent choice in particular if you don't own the Apex or the Cold Comfort God rolls. Next are machine guns. With the Light 3.0 power creep we have at our disposal, machine guns are a good way to set up easy room clears. Things like Retrofit Escapade with Gerfalcon Hunters to blow up rooms with Volatile, or Solar subclasses with fixed odds to ignite waves for decent picks in the first half of the raid. Then there's linear fusions. These have taken a little backseat to rockets recently, just a tad, but overall I think they are a solid choice for overall DPS, in particular linears that are able to roll bait and switch, such as Cataclysmic. But even something like Briar's Contempt would be a good backup for a solid choice if you don't have Cataclysmic. Now I do want to make a small shout out to the Cataphract grenade launcher here, but to be completely honest, if you didn't get a god roll with bait and switch from Trials last week, it's not worth bringing, in my opinion. Last but not least, we have the exotics. Now, we've got Gallahorn coming in with the rocket support. Despite Bungie tweaking Pack Hunter, I believe it's still a reasonable choice to have if your team is just going to be doing rocket damage anyway. Now, speaking of damage, we also got Tractor Cannon for applying debuffs in the event that you get close to a boss like Ear Ute and not require somebody to be on tether instead. The last two exotic choices I'd like to mention are Xenophage and Thunderlord. Now, I know people love to clown on these weapons for being normie weapons, but these weapons have been used time and time again for various ways in day ones to get teams clears. Many teams use these to get through contest Kingsfall Totems, which did hold up a lot of people before they got squashed by War Priest. And they just have good add wave clear capabilities that other weapons don't. And I'm not saying Xeno and Thunderlord are going to be world changers or anything like that, but they're both good at their jobs for being extremely easy to use and serviceable in enemy wave content. So that's all the weapons I would at least think about bringing in with you depending on what you own. As far as the classes themselves, I'll briefly touch on that. And now a word from our sponsor. Just kidding, there is no sponsor. This is just a segue for me to ask you guys to like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow and beat the algorithm. It is much appreciated, and it does help the channel. Alright, back to the video. So as far as talking about builds, I do want to mention that I'll have dim links for some of these builds in the description below that I'm going to be talking about. So feel free to just look at that if you're more interested in what I mentioned. I also have full-blown videos for some of these builds explaining them and breaking them down in detail. So feel free to watch that if you'd like. Otherwise, just listen to me rambling about builds. Here we go. Warlocks. I believe your best bet for this raid is going to be Solar and Arc. Solar because Well of Radiance still exists. And Arc because Arc-based Warlock builds go super hard on encounters like the Abyss, where mobs will be coming at you non-stop. Solar Warlocks, I think your exotic choice here will be rocking the Cenotaph helmet to potentially make ammo for your fire team, or perhaps Sunbracers or Lunafactions for additional support. Titans. Unless Banner of War is disabled, which at the time of recording this, Bungie has not said that it is, this will probably be your number one pick, and knowing me saying this, they'll probably disable it tomorrow. Banner not only keeps you alive, it provides stupid damage, but it also keeps your teammates alive when they're close, which again, in something like the Abyss, is really going to help. You also have the exotic choice of Syntheseps for damage or Ebient Leap for control. Now, of course, there is still the old reliable Solar Titan Bonk build where you yourself become unkillable, but that can also mean you don't protect your teammates. But you could also run Syntheseps on this build just like the Banner build, so it's a kind of a little 2-for-1 there. I just think Banner, with team play in mind, will be more handy, that's all. Lastly, I do want to mention Arctitans, but specifically only for Crota, as you might only get a tiny window of damage, depending how they change him, and T-Crash with Falling Star fits the bill perfectly for that. Also, Pyrogale Burning Maul may be a sleeper pick as well, but that remains to be seen with the whole nerf to using it with Synthos now. While we're on the subject of just for Crota, I do want to shout out the old bubble strat from Destiny 1, where people put a bubble next to Crota, so that the Sword Bearer will get increased damage. That could still work in theory, and I'm not saying you shouldn't try it, but also at the same time, Bungie could change things where maybe Crota is more aggro, and he comes over and just slams your bubble, and then you're done. Or maybe the damage is different in a way where you can't abuse a bubble in this combination anymore. So keep an eye out for it, but I wouldn't say it's top priority currently right now. Hunters. I think if you're running anything but Void or Arc in this raid, you are out of your damn mind. Void Hunters provide such an insane utility to this raid, it's almost comical. You have invisibility, including team invisibility. You have enemy debuffing. You have tether for enemy control. It's wild. You also have a great set of exotics to choose from in Graviton Forfeit, Six Coyote, Omni Oculus, Gerfalcons, and Orpheus Riggs. Arc Hunters are the second choice here, in my opinion, as 1-2 punch Assassin's Cal Hunters are still a force to be reckoned with, and they still provide a good chunk of damage with Star Eaters plus Gathering Storm. However, I worry that in some parts of the raid, the enemy density is going to fall off, which means you spamming your dodge into invis into punch combination might get a little bit lackluster. So I think overall, I would still go with Void. I still think this is a great choice to have, but I would mark this down as option number 2 personally. And that concludes my rambling on this loadout prep guide. I hope this information helps some Guardians out there get their day 1 clears. If you enjoyed the video, consider subbing today and maybe leaving a like or a comment. It does help the channel and is appreciated to beat the YouTube algorithm. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time for the D2 Crota raid guide.